Welcome back to the show. Now we're getting into our Dune Part 2 review. And to start with the overview, this is a 2024 science fiction film directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Timothèe Chalamet, Austin Butler, Zendaya, and Florence Pugh. It follows Paul Atreides as he unites with the freeman people of the desert planet Arrakis to war against House Harrigan. It had a budget of $190 million and brought in $384.1 million to the box office. It also had a 93% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And this movie, I even mentioned to Maurice before the show. I feel as though this is one, the replay value is so high because, first of all, it's cinematically striking. Visually, like, it stands out instantly when you see it. You know, like, hey, this is a movie I'm going to, like, be glued into. And I feel as though as a sequel, it really expanded the character of Paul. And we saw, like, in the first one, we saw about, like, 10 minutes of Zendaya, I think. And then this one, we see, like, a more expanded role of hers. And I mean, this is a flaw. This is a great, outstanding movie to me. I saw it back to back nights. To you, Alex, like, what did you kind of think about this overall, and like some of your initial thoughts?
Yo, this was a cinematic experience. I was unfortunate. I didn't get to see Doom Part 1 in theaters because it did the day and date release. Yeah. It came out in theaters and HBO Max. I saw it on HBO Max. So I said, when Doom Part 2 comes out, I'm going to see it in Dolby Vision at the Disney Theater. Make sure it's be dope. Bro, the moment the movie starts, I feel like I'm on the sand because it's just so it immerses you into the world that they've created. And I think just visually, it just looks so good. The story was good. The progression was good. I've never read the books. I don't know if you guys have ever read the books or anything like that. So I'm really brand new, fresh to the story. So, and Timothée Chalamet, his acting ability has definitely gotten so much better. Yeah. Because last movie I saw him in was Wonka, which I thought was an okay movie. But when I saw him come back for Dune, I could see the growth in the character that he was trying to portray. So this movie was it was definitely impactful. Some people are saying it's like the best movie of 2024 for right now until I see Godzilla versus Kong, which is probably gonna be better, which Dune's probably gonna be better than that. Yeah. I can kind of agree with that statement, but oh my God, there's so many things that I enjoyed about this movie. It makes me wonder what's going to happen in part 3 if there is going to be a part 3. So
there's gotta be. I think there's gotta be.
They already have like the next few movies planned out. I think the next one's going to drop in 26, I believe.
Yeah,
or 25 at the end of 25. Yeah.
So next year.
Wow.
Yeah,
they're coming quick.
Yeah.
Well, remember, this movie got delayed, so that's probably
that's
why.
true.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. This, I mean, the book is like huge, right? So we're like, I think we're still not even, I don't even know if we're through the first book with the second movie. So there's still so much that has to happen. So they're definitely, this is like a franchise. This is going to be like the next Star Wars, basically. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in terms of a blockbuster success, it's up there. To you, Maurice, like when you look at this overall, and especially, I mean, you were on for the first Dune review that we did. What were your thoughts on how it followed it up, and how did it kind of just meet your expectations as a sequel?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent, perfect sequel because in the first movie, my comments were basically like, I loved the movie. It was very stunning. It was different than everything else that had came out to that point, right? Soundtrack was amazing. Hans Zimmer, always amazing,
the GOAT,
right?
The GOAT.
Yeah, goated. He does probably gonna do all these movies.
Yes.
So it fits so well, right? I think some things that they lacked in the first movie they made up for in this movie. One of them being the storyline, right? The storyline is way more fleshed out, way more immersive. You get to know the characters a lot better. And then you also have like these funny moments where they're joking about like the Paul being like him, right? Like everything he does, they're like, oh,
he was getting clowned on. He was getting clowned on heavily.
Yeah. I love that. I love the kind of like funniness to it compared to the first movie. They had like, those funny moments, and also just building on top of that, just kind of, I think a lot of what happened in the first movie was the world and the soundtrack washed out the actual movie and the content of the movie. But in this movie, that's not the case at all. Everything's really balanced and everything's really fleshed out. So I feel like this is like the perfect sequel to kind of get you really hooked into the this series for the long run.
To you, Alex, before we move on, like when you look at these first two movies and then like the next one they have coming up for the trilogy, like do you feel as though this could go down as like one of the best trilogies we've had in a while, like in terms of the fact that the first one was a solid movie, the second one was outstanding, and then the third one, I think the expectations are even higher than even the first two.
It definitely has the potential. I mean, Denis Villeneuve has not missed when it comes to this franchise. Like I said, like I think if the first one had the same gravitas as this one, I think people would be a little bit more hype about, like, in terms of it being a trilogy.
Yeah.
But I certainly think I think it can, because when I look at this movie in particular, sometimes sequels have a hard time being better than the first one.
Oh, yeah.
And since the first one was so much explaining what Dune was, and then we actually get to go into Dune and the second one a little bit more.
Yeah.
The second one, like I said, had everything. I believe the second one had everything that the first one was somewhat lacking, in a sense. Because the first one was definitely building up the characters, building up the relationships to get connected to these characters. And this one, and we literally saw them flourish, and we put them in essentially dire situations to see what they were going to do. So after what we saw, I'm really, that's why I'm wondering, like, what is part 3 going to be? Because at this point, it kind of reminded me of Across the Spider-Verse, right? Like when we saw Miles look at Miles, it's like, okay, how are you going to get out of this situation? And that's all I kept thinking about at the end of Dune. Like, how are they going to compete with this? Like, this was just crazy. And my prayer is that I hope that Denis Villeneuve does the third movie. Like he does. I hope he doesn't leave. I hope he continues out his trilogy. Because like I said, like this was a from watching it in Dolby Cinema, like I said, I felt like there were certain parts I was in the movie because of the how it was shot and how the surround sound. And I was like, and every time you heard like a character walk, you heard the footsteps, you heard the movement, you heard, it was like you were, the director very really paid attention to the small aspects of this movie. So, and also again with the story sets it up where there's going to be a part 3, and hopefully this part 3 is better or almost the same as part 2. So I do think it has the potential, but it also does have the potential to be a crappy part 3 movie. So like because when people look at like
those third movies can be rough.
Yeah, like I immediately think of The Dark Knight Rises. It's not a bad movie, but in comparison to the first
movie.
2 movies, it's not that great. You know,
right? I can see that. It does pale into comparison to Batman Begins and Dark Knight, because Dark Knight was like probably the greatest sequel we've honestly ever had in totality.
Hard to live that shadow.
For sure. And now getting into our first topic, from 1 to 4 stars, what would you give it? I would definitely go with 4, because I think this, as we've mentioned already, it expanded on the first part, and I think we seeing seeing Paul's character really like develop throughout the movie, going from the beginning, he's like unsure of himself. He's still like not really sure if he's going to be that guy, and then by the end of it, he already knows. Like he knows that he's going to be the one. He's going to lead them. There's no hesitation with what his mentality is. To you, Maurice, from 1 to 4 stars, what would you give it?
Yeah, I can remember you do like the 4 stars. I wish it was out of 10.
Okay, we can bump it up, man. We can bump it up. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, yeah, if it was out of 4, I would give it a 4. Yeah. I don't think it's the perfect movie though. You know, I do think there's stuff that can be worked on.
What was the imperfection? What was kind of like the imperfection?
So this is when I think of Dune, right? And this is something I wanted to talk about too. Is like, you know, like I feel like when I compare, because Dune really was like the original Star Wars. Dune came before Star Wars, right?
It did.
Right.
So a lot of the elements in Star Wars are kind of inspiration from Dune. But, you know, Star Wars being with Disney and all this stuff, right? They turned it into this like family friendly movie, and like everyone knows Star Wars, right? It's so like recognizable. You can watch it anytime, any mood, right? I feel like for Dune, I don't know if you can watch it like if you're like in certain moods, right? I feel like you definitely have to be locked in
you
for
can't just flip
for
on
Dune.
Dune.
Yeah, you can't just put it on and be like,
you hear that, Savon? You hear that, Savon?
like,
You
yeah.
can't just hey,
You
listen, I
won't
just
just
want to
have
say
it in the
this. I just want to say
background,
this,
Same
right?
guy
listeners.
who likes Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Savon, he wanted me to tell you guys he hated Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
But get this, catch this. He didn't watch the first one. So what is he talking about?
Yeah,
Keep
crazy.
going.
Exactly.
Keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, just like I feel like you can't just put it on in the background, right? It needs to be something you're giving attention to, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I think of Star Wars, I think of something that you can just throw in the background. Everybody knows what it is. It's gonna last for generations. So I'm curious to see kind of like when it's all said and done in a few years, whether or not I think it's going to be super impactful, and I think it is like a really good movie. But when I thought about it, I'm like, the impact that I had from it was not like a feeling that I got from watching Star Wars. It was more of like, whoa, this is amazing, you know. But when that like kind of hype dies down, like what's left? That's kind of what I'm interested to see what happens in a few years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like he's saying it's not going to age well. Sounds like I'm not gonna spoil the last topic.
I mean, he kind of gave me perspective on that too. Like, not after this is a opinion.
Yeah.
To you, Alex, from 1 to 4 stars, what will be your particular rating of it?
Oh, definitely 4 stars. And after listening to Maurice's opinion, it kind of changes my perception of it, of the future, because he's right. You can throw on Star Wars in any generation. Like, kids now know what it is.
Yeah.
Like, even if something is like Rogue One, people know what Rogue One is, and that's relatively a new movie, right?
Yeah.
Dune, and the thing about Star Wars, not to harp on it too well, Star Wars has like essentially years of stories to tell.
Oh yeah.
I think Dune only has a limited run in terms of a book series. Correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't have the same type of lineage with Star Wars. But he's right that when Star Wars was created, it was based upon like the world building of Dune and how leadership in these different colonies and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, I'm like, Dune does have the potential to be Star Wars, but after you finish that third movie, it's kind of like, well,
what else?
Where do you go?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Like, I'm even asking that same question, even going into the third movie. In the third movie, what's going aside from death, what's going to happen to our main characters? Like, that's like what's going to happen. So for me, now that I think about it, I do think it will be a series that, you know, our generations would watch, but I don't think it will ever hit Star Wars hype unless, you know, this movie miraculously maybe hits $1 billion. Then we could probably have that conversation.
Yeah. I think I think it does have. So I think I don't know if I'm right, but I think there's like 9 books, right? There's 9 books. So we're still on like book 1, right? We might be a little into book 2. So there's a lot of content left and story for them to tell. So it's definitely going to be more than a trilogy.
It's going to be a trilogy. It's not just
going to be it's going to be like a franchise. It will be like Star Wars in that way. I think
if they do it that way, would you want Denis to stop at 3 and have a new director pick up the reins?
No. Yeah, I like. So I think that's the difference, though. Is like, so when you think about the environment and the type of movie Dune is, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like it's kind of not like that, like family friendly movie. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be like epic, you know, cinematic like world. Like I'm like immersed into it, right? If I'm thinking of Star Wars, like I'm not that immersed into Star Wars. I'm just having a good time watching it. Like maybe there are some moments where I'm immersed to it, like when they're fighting, or if there's like some epic like thing that goes on, you know, you find out in the story. But it's very like family friendly. It's very like oh, this is Star Wars. This is so cool. You know, this is like. But Dune is like, what's going on? Like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's a different feeling. So I feel like if they keep that up the whole time, I just wonder about the longevity of it. You know, like it's kind of like one of those things where it's like when you watch something so good and you kind of just want to not tear down that memory of how good it was, because when you rewatch it and it's not like hitting like Star Wars is, right? When you rewatch it, it's like, oh, you know, that was good, but like
it wasn't the first time.
Yeah, you know, it's hard to relive the experience of watching Dune for the first time again, right? Like that feeling is hard to recreate over and over again for them to do this like for the next 10 years, right? If they make movies for the next 10 years, I wonder about the longevity of that feeling that they can keep recreating or not,
Yeah, and that was dope because when you said that, I immediately thought of when I saw Across the Spider-Verse, and then when it came out on Netflix, I rewatched it on Netflix. Good movie, but it didn't feel the same.
Yeah.
It really didn't feel the same.
Yeah.
A lot different. A lot different. Some movies they really like. I would recommend anybody go to the movies to see Dune Part 2. Don't wait.
Yeah. Oh,
this is not one you can just wait to like. It will not feel the same. It will not feel the same unless
you can. And I feel like I was robbed because I never saw the first one in theaters.
Oh yeah, the first one in theaters was even. Honestly, like Max, seeing the first one in theater was even crazier than the second one because it was so like soundtrack focused and like just that noise like that was like the first movie. I feel like that IMAX experience or that like experience like was definitely super soundtrack focused. Whereas this one like had a little bit more story, it had a little bit more like grit to it, like in depth. Yeah, so you could watch it even without experiencing like the amazingness of like the soundtrack and sound effects.
Definitely. And I'll get into our next topic, favorite character. I would go with Chani because I feel as though her overall character arc was really interesting because she didn't believe in the savior and the savior storyline and that being a real thing. She kind of wanted to just stay loyal to her people. She even said like, I'm not fighting for him, I'm fighting for my people. Like she was adamant from the jump about like, hey, this is who I'm sticking with. Even if he changes, I'm not going with it. To you, Alex, overall, who was your favorite character in this one?
It's funny you took the words out my mouth. She was my favorite character because what I loved about it is that she was like, listen, I don't really care. And that's the nice version, but she didn't really care what was going on.
Yeah.
I'm fighting for my people. And like you couldn't convince her otherwise. Like she had a mission and she was willing to take care of it. And what I loved about it though also was the progression of her character throughout the movie as well. So even though sometimes her view wasn't necessarily shaken, she knew what she wanted. Yeah. And that's what I loved about her. I was gonna say Timothée Chalamet's character was also a close second, obviously, because he's like the main character. But as you stated before, like she knew what she wanted to do. She was the one who really kept me the most engaged.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you take her out, it's still a good movie, but
it's not a great movie.
It's not a great movie. Yeah.
Definitely. To you, Maurice, overall, who was kind of your favorite character in this one?
Man, y'all sleep on that boy Fade, bro. That man.
I
think his acting was amazing.
He was crazy.
Austin Butler did an amazing job as Fade. He brought energy to the movie, I think, because in the first half, I'm not gonna lie, the first part of the movie to me was a little slow. It had to build up. It was kind of just like, oh, like they're learning how to attack the ships and stuff and all this stuff, right? But then when Fade comes in and you get this like. Up. Yeah, the energy instantly, like you're like, okay, this is the guy that they're about to fight. This guy, he knows how to fight, right? This is gonna be like not an easy thing, I think it's interesting that they kind of just they made it so easy for him to be like no spoilers, I guess, but like persuaded by the Bene Gesserit. So like that whole scene was like, all right, bro, like we get it, like you guys can whisper stuff, but it was like, bro, I wanted my man to be like unbreakable, like like I feel like that's the acting that he invoked within that character, but I feel like his character was kind of like weakened so that the other characters can shine, like the agenda of the Bene Gesserit or the agenda of like making Paul like the best character or the hero. I feel like Austin Butler's character was weakened a bit in that way, but he still had his moments throughout the film, I think.
I know we're not supposed to spoil memorable scenes, but that black and white gladiators.
Look,
God,
that's what I was gonna say. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it,
but I have to talk about that. That changed the movie. I was like,
that changed the movie for me.
It's different.
Yeah.
Did y'all feel like y'all were in a different movie when that popped up?
Yes.
I was like, where am I? Oh my God.
Yes. That was such a nice change for the movie. Like that
I wish they would have shot that whole movie in black and white. That would have been different.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. And this is why I'll say I think what I really wanted, I wanted the last fight to be shot in black and white. That's what
that
I
would be
really,
fun.
that's what I really want.
Yeah. And in that style though, like
Yes.
yeah, because it wouldn't have worked with the way that that shot was the last fight was, but if it was in the style of that
Oh
scene
my
where it's like that big
goodness.
arena, like oh my
Yes.
goodness, and then you had those creepy like soldiers in the back. I was like, what are those things? Like,
Yeah.
is this man like is he in hell right now? Like, are those demons like just walking? Like, bro, costume
Yeah.
design was crazy. Like,
What?
it
The
was a
attention to
world.
detail in this movie was
It was a
crazy.
world. Yeah.
Can we be on? Okay, we're just coming off the Oscars. Oppenheimer sweeps almost everything.
Yeah.
What are the chances Doom Part 2 just goes in for an historic run next year with all the award categories? Because I
If
think they could be racking up a lot of
I
awards.
don't know what's coming out this year.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I don't know what's coming out this year yet, but it's possible. I think it's very possible.
I think you'll get nominated for best picture or best. I think you'll get nominated for best picture, maybe best screenwriting, and then maybe best supporting actor or actress. But I gotta see what comes out
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still
throughout the
early.
rest
It's
of
still
the
early in the
year.
year. Still early in the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can
Cinematography
say
too,
though,
maybe?
it's starting, it's firing at all cylinders.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, for sure,
you know, yeah.
definitely. And now getting to most memorable scenes, I had the first Sandworm appearance, also the first Freeman stealth mission, the destruction montage. Paul learns how to ride a Sandworm, the Spice Deploy explosion, the Coliseum battle on Giddy Prime. Paul becomes the Messiah, then finally Paul and Fade battle to the death. Obviously, we mentioned the Coliseum one. That's one that's up there for me. And I really feel as though when Paul becomes the Messiah and his speech there, that was a pivotal kind of like groundbreaking moment where everybody saw the shift and you saw the confidence in him change.
Yeah.
To you, Alex, were there any like particular memorable scenes in this one for you?
Well, definitely, where Paul becomes the Messiah. It's like his character. We were watching him grow and mature into his calling. But that final battle scene, oh my god. Oh my
Yeah.
god. I thought I was watching like the only time I've really felt really engaged in a battle scene like that are kind of like high intense action movies, like maybe like I can't even Winter Soldier keeps popping in my head, but also like Mission Impossible, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But this
I see that.
scene takes the cake because
It does.
the way the camera is moving, and I don't know if it's like, I don't know if this is like AI or an editing tool, but it's like they were really like killing people in that battle. Like you literally see like the actors are literally giving it their all in this battle. So I personally really like that scene. Also, Paul rising to be the Messiah. I thought it was, for me, I thought that was a very humbling moment for him, because I think that if you watch the movie, part of him, we all knew that something like that was going to happen, but I also kind of felt like in his character he didn't want that to happen
Yeah.
just yet.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't expecting it to happen, but although this is the bridge he was ultimately going to cross, it came right in time for him. So seeing those two scenes, and then also that black and white scene, oh my god,
Yeah.
man,
Chef's kiss
crazy.
for
Yeah.
sure. To you, Maurice, like what were some of the memorable scenes in this one overall for you, or maybe like one or two?
Yeah, definitely the black and white scene. That was my favorite scene in the whole movie, and definitely the final fight as well. Something that Alex said that kind of brought me back to the first movie. You know, where Paul's father tells him, like, "Yo, like you're not the hero. Like the hero isn't the person that wants to be the hero. It's the person that does it. Like when they're not called to, or something like that. They're called to it and they respond to it,
Yeah.
not the person that's like seeking it or whatever." So that what you said kind of just brought me back to he stepping up in the moment where like he doesn't want to be that guy, but he
Right.
does it because he know it needs to be done, right?
Right.
So that kind of call back to the first movie. It makes a lot of sense with the way you said it. But yeah, definitely black and white scene, favorite scene, changed the movie. I think that scene is going to be really, really important for how they kind of can construct the next movie to be like unique as well.
For sure. And before we move on, in terms of like a character that you would say like was underrated, because I feel as though Stilgar in this one was he had a really good like Javier Bardem's performance in this one was he had a lot of the humor, made the film light at times. Anytime Paul did anything, he's like, "Oh, this is the one. This is the Messiah."
Yep.
Like he was in full go mode from the jump. To you, Alex, was there any like particular character that you kind of say like was more of an underrated one?
The only reason why I would say no is because I felt like every character shined. They played their
Yeah,
part.
that is fair.
Yep.
Yeah,
They played their part. And they're what I will say, because of the way it ended, I wanted to see more of Timothée Chalamet. But as far as him, I think everyone's role was divided evenly because there wasn't more that I wanted to see from each and every character. I will say, to your point, where those funny moments were popping up, I do wish we kind of got somewhat more of that a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
But Dune, like even when you watch the first movie, it's not meant to be like a Marvel movie
Yep.
sprinkled
It's not
with so many
Marvel. Yep.
comedy elements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like essentially the premise is
Serious.
kill or be killed
Yep.
and trust no one essentially. And and I don't think anyone was underrated per se. However, I will say there are certain little things that could have been added to make it better, but I think every character had their part to shine. So
Definitely. Maurice, do you kind of feel the same way? It was kind of evenly distributed.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was underrated necessarily. I would have liked to see more of the mom. I feel like she has a
Yeah,
really important role, and I feel like we don't see much of her. We kind of just know she's doing stuff in the background, right? While Paul is like improving and becoming the Messiah, right? She's doing stuff in the background and convincing, like that all happened, and we didn't see any of it, right? When she convinced, like we saw her saying, like, "Oh, we need to convince these people to like believe in the stuff," right? I
yeah.
want to see more about what the Bene Gesserit are doing and what their plan is, right? I kind of going back to the quote thing, like that was one of the quotes they said is like, "We don't." She talks about like, "Oh, you picked the wrong side," right? The mom says it to the other head person or whatever, and she says like, "Oh, we don't hope, we plan," right? So this whole thing is along the plan for the Bene Gesserit. So I would like to see more like of the background stuff that's going on with her specifically, because I feel like she plays such a pivotal role for Paul's like legacy and his becoming the Messiah that we don't get to see that much of it in the movie. And then I also would like to see more of Florence Pugh's character. I think she'll be more important in
She'll be
the
shown
upcoming
more in third
movies.
one. Yeah, she'll be
Yeah,
shown more in
it's
third
kind of like how Zendaya in
one.
the
And
last movie was
that's what
like
I thought.
just there for the last 2 minutes. Like it was the same with Florence Pugh. Like she will be an important character in the next few movies. I mean, they're
And
gonna
she stole
they're gonna be
Zendaya's man.
married, right?
And
Yeah,
she
like
stole Zendaya's man. That's so
yeah,
cool. That's so
exactly, right? There's gonna be some beef there, So, but yeah, I think overall though, I think yeah, everyone kind of like everyone had like a good like place.
Yeah, definitely. And now getting to most memorable quotes, I had "I'm the voice from the outer world" from Paul. Also, "We must convert the non-believers" from Jessica. "Power over spices, power over all." "The Mahdi's too humble to say he's the Mahdi" from Stilgar. "I won't be fighting for him. I'm fighting for my people" from Chani. "You underestimate the power of faith" from Princess Cerulin. "The hardest I'm meant to rule" from Emperor Shaddam the Fourth. And then finally, "You fought well," Atreides. A lot of good quotes in this one. To you, Alex, were there any like particular standouts?
it wasn't necessarily a quote; it was more so the speech where Paul is giving when he rises to be
Yeah.
the Messiah.
Yeah,
Um, I don't remember it word for word, but basically he was essentially saying, "I'm taking responsibility. There's nothing you can do about it." Like he,
yeah,
what do So I thought there wasn't like I said, there wasn't a specific quote, but it kind of reminded. And I hate drawing comparison to this because the comparison I'm about to draw is such a bad movie. But I was watching that Zack Snyder movie, Rebel Moon, and there's a
Mm,
scene where somebody dies and he's giving a speech about war and stuff. That's what it kind of reminded me of. And how Paul is ascending to his Messiah role is that he's just basically taking charge,
yeah.
and there's nothing you can do to stop him. And Anyone who's listening or watching this podcast, please do not go watch Rebel Moon.
Don't do it.
That's a movie that Savon would like.
Oh yeah.
Oh dang.
2 stars. 2 star.
Exactly.
Fan of the
It was
2-star
10
film.
stars.
Savon
Oh
approved.
man.
Yes.
That's tough right there.
To you, Maurice, were there any like kind of particular memorable quotes in this one?
Yeah, besides the ones that you named, I think there's one that Paul said, which was something along the lines of "Our resources are limited. Fear is all we have." So that one is a really good quote. You know, it's just talking about like, you know, they didn't have the biggest army, they didn't have the best equipment and all this stuff, but they did have the fear and the element of like they had the advantage over the people in the desert, right? So they had that kind of advantage, and they made them fear Paul. Like everybody was afraid of Paul except for Fade, you know, and he caught that Fade. You know what I'm saying? So like, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like yeah. but yeah, that was a good quote, I think.
Definitely. And now getting into kind of like what did you like the most about the storyline? And I've kind of said it throughout the episode. I think Paul's progression is something that is kind of hard to overlook. Going into Dune Messiah, he had to take this jump and this leap. And also, I think the contrast him and Chani, like how he needed Chani to get to where he needed to get to, and then when it was most important, and that he had to make the strategic move, he had to do away with her. So it was almost like they needed each other at certain points in the movie, and then he kind of had to discard her at the end. I thought that was another kind of fascinating subplot. To you, Alex, was there a kind of particular element of the storyline that you kind of liked the most?
Well, obviously the progression of Paul's character, but I just like the scenes with his mom.
Yeah,
like the scenes because now that I think about it, I do wish there was a little bit more of that, but basically she's kind of just like reassuring him, and like that's the only family he really kind of has left. If there's anyone who's seen the first one, don't want to spoil anything, but I I really enjoyed those scenes that he had with his mom. And I would say the progression of his character, like that's why I go back to part one. He was so innocent, and then he got molded into where he needed to be, and then you get into part two, it's like now everything that he says, everything that he's somewhat been training for, he has to kind of live out now. And uh once he finally meets his final ascension, it's like, okay, it's kind of like seeing a boy coming into a manhood.
Yep.
And it was very humbling to see. And some of my favorite parts of that progression was just seeing his interactions with his mom. So yeah.
Definitely. So you, Maurice, was there like a particular element of the storyline that you kind of like the most?
Yeah, I think just fleshing out the characters and the way they did compared to the first movie. You know, I feel like we didn't get that much character development. We got a lot of world building. We got a lot of immersion into the world of Dune. But now we actually get to find out like what Dune is and how the world operates, what's important to people, what's the politics of everything that's happening within Dune. You know, we really get to kind of understand how things are starting to play out and kind of where the future is headed, you know? So I really like that they really took the time to develop those storylines and just kind of give you like more insight to what's happening behind the scenes and what the purpose of Dune really is compared to just like drone sounds and like crazy like soundtracks and stuff.
For sure. And getting to our last topic, 10 years from now, do you still think this will be watchable and intriguing? And this is obviously a new release. We usually do these, this topic when it's like 5-10 years later, but this is kind of like, a brand new one. I think it will be when you look at the overall just tapestry of the film, how it was put together, how it was shot. I mean, just so many striking scenes that you just can't get over. For the casual viewers, for the Savon viewers who don't want a deep movie, they're like, nah, I don't want this. But I think for us, people who really like these types of movies and how it's shot and how it's put together with fleshing out the character, I think it's going to be one that ages well. And obviously, Dune Messiah is going to even show more of like how much we go back to this film. But to you, Alex, how do you kind of think this will be watchable and intriguing another decade from now?
I think the people who are fans of Dune would probably watch it 5 or 10 years from later. Because unfortunately, kind of like what Maurice was touching on, even though Star Wars pulled from Dune,
yes,
Dune is ultimately not Star Wars. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about it. Dune originally has come out before. Like, this is essentially a remake of the original. And I don't know if y'all saw it. I haven't seen it, but after watching these movies, I don't plan on seeing the original because I can only think that the original
it's gonna be weird.
has nothing it will have nothing in comparison to what we have seen now, and that's just because of modern technology, obviously. So, and I'm willing to, like I said, and then I remember when they were making the first Dune, the only people who were really excited for Dune were the fans of Dune and fans of the lore. And I think those people came back this year, obviously, because we couldn't go to the theater really to see it last time it was out. And then now it's catching on kind of like World on Fire because of how cinematic it is.
Yeah.
But one of my friends was asking me, "You think you'll hit $1 billion?" I don't know. I don't know. I know it'll be successful, but I don't know if it'll hit $1 billion. If it does, then maybe I would be more confident and say, people outside of just the average fan would watch it 5 or 10 years from now. But I don't think Dune, as in relates to these first two movies, have cached enough popularity for everyone in the world to go back and see just yet. Because like I said, like, this is a specific franchise for people who are either in love with film in general or just in love with the franchise. So those people will go back and watch it. But like, say someone who watches like a Marvel movie or a comedy or whatever, they'll go back and watch those Marvel and comedies back to back to back.
Yeah.
But I don't think Dune would be on their list.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
To Merce, to close it out, how do you kind of view this in terms of the watchability and intriguing another decade from now? And obviously, it's gonna be even more expanded with more films coming up after it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Alex said, I think when we look at it into the long run, we'll have to see how it plays out, right? Like how far they really stretch this franchise. I think if they do a good job with the franchise, then it could build up to be like a Star Wars, right? Where it does have a lot of people, and because it's so popular right now and it's cinematic, people are getting put onto Dune that didn't know Dune before, right? So they are bringing in new fans and they are bringing in attention. But I don't think they will like have the retention of those fans because I think people are seeing it because it's cool to see, it's the thing to see. But I think in 10 years, like, Star Wars is going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, you haven't seen Star Wars? How have you not seen Star Wars? I don't think people will say that about Dune. I think it'll be like, oh, you haven't seen Dune? You should watch that. That's a good movie. It's not the same. Like, it's not like one of those, like, I don't know if it's going to be like a classic movie. I think it is niche and it is like a good movie. But, the people that will go back and watch it or show like their kids or something or other people are going to be people that are already fans of it. Like, I don't know if people are just going to pick up Dune and be like, oh, I should watch this because everybody else watches it. I think that's like the core difference. But I do think in 10 years it should still be like rewatchable, and it'll be like fun to kind of relive too.
I do think the star element of Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya though could carry it as well. But I think sometimes people will be like, "Oh man, remember those? Remember that, like, having stars like that, because they really are becoming that." That's another. Yeah. I think that's another aspect of like why we didn't hear about Dune whenever it came, whenever their first original came out, because it didn't have that same cachet. But Alex didn't properly introduce you, head of Momentum Media. Thank you so much for doing this and being on for this review. You got anything new coming up?
Actually, I interviewed one of my friends who released a comic book called Reset and Angel Volume 2. He's a Black comic book creator. I interviewed him on my show.
Nice.
Please go to Amazon and support this.
That's awesome.
It's a really dope comic book. It's in vein of something like, if you like it's like The Boys mixed in with Invincible. It's a really
fire.
and it also has some comedy elements in it. It's really dope. So I interviewed him for that. I'm actually revamping my channel now, so there's certain things that I'm changing around, and I have a new podcast that's coming out once I'm done recording that. So I'm just getting some other things around, and hopefully my next big interview will be with Tim Ross. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Tim Ross, but he's a podcaster of the podcast called The Basement. So he's going to be on I talked to his people, so he should be on my show hopefully in the next couple months or so.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Listeners, definitely check that out. Maurice, as always, thank you so much for doing this. Savon ducked out again for a movie review. But it's a pleasure as always, man.
Yeah, man. Of course. Happy to be here, bro.
Definitely. Well, that wraps it up for tonight. I'm your host, William Burns. This has been Full Scope. See you later.